We've seen in previous segments what miracles are and why God would use them. Now let's look at the question of whether Jesus actually did miracles, and if so, what we can learn from them. As a Christian, I find a lot of hope in the Bible. It tells me there's a God who cares about me, who heals people, and who ultimately provides a way for us to know Him forever. Now, a lot of people looking at Christianity from the outside ask the question, can we really trust anything the Bible says when it has so many miracles? Why should we believe anything about Jesus when it sounds more like a fantastical, mythical story than a realistic historical account? I understand the hesitation. Even as a Christian, I have a naturally critical mind, and I'm often ready to break down the logical flaws of ideas that are presented to me. On top of that, I don't ever want to be gullible, blindly believing something just because I want it to be true or because somebody told me it's true. But even in light of that, when we actually look at the miracles of Jesus, there are some compelling reasons to believe they actually happened. To explore this, we're going to look at a surprising source that validates Jesus' miracles: the enemies of Jesus. There are three ways the enemies of Jesus contribute to the historical case that Jesus was a miracle worker. First, the enemies of Jesus didn't deny His miracles. Historians, even secular historians, are nearly unanimous on this fact. The enemies of Jesus saw Him as a miracle worker. What the Pharisees tried to do was to catch Him on technicalities, such as the fact that many of His miracles were performed on the Sabbath. In John 9:16, it says, "Some of the Pharisees said, 'This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath.' But others said, 'How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?' And there was a division among them." When their appeals to the Sabbath guidelines failed, the Pharisees tried to attribute His power to a nefarious source. In Matthew 9:34, the Pharisee says He cast out demons by the prince of demons. But as Jesus pointed out, this was a nonsensical objection because Satan wouldn't want to cast out his own allies. And either way, it shows that even the Pharisees could not deny that He was actually doing miracles. This is incredible. Not only were Jesus' followers convinced that He was doing supernatural feats, but even the enemies of Jesus couldn't deny it. The second way the enemies of Jesus surprisingly help us is in the area of Jesus' greatest miracle, the resurrection. You see, they inadvertently admitted the tomb of Jesus was empty. Christianity began in Jerusalem, the city where Jesus was crucified and buried. Most historians agree that Jesus was buried in the personal tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, just as the gospel records say it happened. So the site of Jesus' tomb was well known. If the body of Jesus was still in the tomb, then the Romans and the Pharisees would have had all the evidence they needed to disprove the resurrection. Instead, the enemies of Jesus admitted the tomb was empty. They did this when they claimed that the disciples stole the body. As the author of The Case for Christ, Lee Strobel, points out, this is just a weak cover story to explain why the tomb was empty. The early church fathers Justin Martyr and Tertullian report that this cover story was the common explanation used by Jews during that time and for subsequent centuries. By telling this story, the enemies of Jesus were admitting that the tomb was empty, which is a powerful evidence for the very claim that He made about Himself, that He would die and rise from the dead. Third, the enemies of Jesus saw Him alive. One of the most powerful reasons to believe in the miracle of the resurrection is that Jesus' earliest followers were convinced that they had seen Him alive and were willing to die for this fact. Again, the majority of historians, even secular historians, agree that the apostles were convinced of these appearances. What many people don't realize is that this includes two former opponents of Jesus who became followers because they had seen Jesus alive. The first is James, the brother of Jesus, who was a skeptic. He didn't believe his brother was the Messiah during His earthly ministry, and James wasn't even present at His crucifixion. But seeing his brother alive from the dead later convinced him that Jesus was indeed a miracle worker and the Messiah Himself. The second enemy is the Apostle Paul, who was originally Saul, a persecutor of the church and a violent enemy of Jesus. But when the risen Jesus appeared to him, Saul couldn't help but call him Lord. Because of the miracle of the resurrection, these enemies became followers of Jesus, and their conversion gives us confidence that the Bible is right when it talks about the miracles of Jesus. So when we read the Bible and see the miracles of Jesus, we can know with confidence that what we're reading is true. Jesus really made the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame walk, and the dead rise. The enemies of Jesus had to admit that he was a miracle worker, and we should too. More than that, the miracles of Jesus, and especially his resurrection from the dead, show us that he had the credentials unlike any other religious leader before or after him, and give us good reasons to believe that he is who he claimed to be, the Son of God, who came to offer us salvation.